So there has been a massive ecological disaster in Maryland. The Potomac sewage spill has been going on since January, and a little bit over, or roughly 200 million gallons of waste sewage water has spilled into the Potomac River, America's river. It's over 3,800 miles long. For those of you who might not be familiar with it, it runs through Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, and is really important for the local wildlife of all of these states. And I know as a Marylander, it's very important for our local culture, our state, and is also connected to our drinking water. If this pipe, where it broke, was to have broken just like 2 or 3 more miles upstream, this could have had a negative effect on local drinking water for our area, including my area. It could have had a really negative effect. It could have been worse. It's still really bad. This is an unprecedented spill of sewage into the Potomac River, to the point where after water tests were done and the amount of E. coli that was found in the water was enough to say, like, no, nobody can go into the Potomac River. Don't go into the Potomac River. They've been putting up signs next to the river. And this is the river people play in. This is the river that people like go in and they take their families to. Like, don't go into the Potomac River. It's now full of sewage. It has E. coli. We don't want people to catch E. coli, get sick and die. Don't go into the river, which is like goes through people's backyards. Don't drink the Potomac punch, as somebody Jiggerath in site chat put it. So this is pretty bad. This is pretty bad. Now these pipes were installed in the 1960s, right? They're in due need of replacement. We have like a roughly 50-mile long pipe, over 50-mile long pipe that was installed in the 1960s that is in due need of a replacement. Now Donald Trump has reacted to this crisis as Maryland is in need of assistance from the federal government. At the same time that Maryland is suffering economically from the federal job loss, a lot of these cuts, I would even say a lion's share of these cuts that were being made when it comes to states being affected, Maryland was probably hit the hardest. A lot of DC workers work in Maryland, people who work at research institutes, people who work in like aid programs, people who work in DC and a lot of these federal government jobs, a lot of these, some could call them bureaucrats, some of them may call them pencil pushers, but a lot of them are doing real important work. You know, if you want to catch a tax cheat, somebody who's actually getting out of paying their taxes, you need people at the IRS to do that. Well, with those job losses, it's not just that those people in the state of Maryland who live in Maryland, because Maryland is right there in, DC, DMV area, the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area, were connected by the metro system. They go there and they work. They don't have their jobs anymore. They're not paying taxes. But it's not just that they're not paying taxes. They're also not going to restaurants. They're also not consuming more. They're also not paying that sales tax. And so that has a negative effect, not just on them, but also the businesses that are reliant on them. And there was just a Key Bridge disaster. There was also some flooding that Maryland did not get any assistance with as well. And at the same time, Maryland is trying to go through with some pretty important education investments. And so Maryland state budget right now does not have a lot of money that it can be throwing around. And right now, Trump's position is that Maryland should not have to pay a single, well, no, not that Maryland shouldn't have to pay. Maryland should have to pay every single dime. And the federal government, they don't really have any responsibility. But maybe they could help if Maryland says, please. Let me read this to you. Here's the first post he put out there. This was 3 days ago. And 3 days ago is when it was measured to be roughly 200 million tons. 200 million tons of sewage. Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C., who are responsible for the massive sewage spill in the Potomac River, must get to work immediately. If they can't do the job, they have to call me and ask politely to get it fixed. The federal government is not at all involved with what has taken place, but we can fix it. But remember, even in that case, with the Democrat shutdown, we'll have to bring in true patriots to do the work because many are not working right now. These Democrat-caused disasters, both river and shutdown, will not only get worse. The two governors and mayor of D.C. must act immediately. This is a radical left caused environmental hazard. With all of their talk about carbon footprints and everything else, they're allowing hundreds of tons of sewage to pour into the mighty Potomac, making it much less mighty. Act fast. I am awaiting your call. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Now, he says that this is a DC, this is like a Maryland, this is their issue. Maryland, Virginia, and DC. This is their issue. Now, mind you, if it's a DC issue, then it's also a federal issue because it's federal land, and the company involved, DC Water, the board of that company is appointed by the DC mayor and city council, right? So saying that, like Maryland and Virginia, they don't get any say in how that board is managed. So I don't know how it can be our fault. And trust me, he really went into detail, particularly targeting Westmore over it. There was a massive ecological disaster unfolding in the Potomac River as a result of the gross mismanagement of local Democrat leaders, particularly Governor Westmore of Maryland. But Governor Westmore of Maryland has zero impact on the people who are chosen for the board of DC Water, which manages this pipe for DC. Which again, this is federal land. If they don't get senators that vote, if they don't get Congress people that vote, if they get taxation without representation, the idea is that the federal government is responsible for that land. You can both not tell them, hey, you don't have representation in Congress, you don't have representation in the Senate, you don't get to be your own state, you're federal land, but also the federal government's not responsible for you. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And it doesn't make sense that you would blame Maryland for the crisis when, again, we did not choose the members of the board that oversaw this DC water company. That's the first thing. The second thing is the EPA has direct authority in overseeing this. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is a federal institution. So to say again, we have nothing to do with this. We have nothing to do with this. It just has to do with a DC company that operates out of federal land, and a break that goes through federal land of a pipeline that is overseen by the Environmental Protection Agency, a federal agency. But it has nothing to do with the federal government. We have nothing to do with it. But you have to ask nicely. He knows that it has to do with him, so he's just trying to frame it so that the governor of Maryland has to come in and ask him to do something so he can seem like, oh, you know what? It's not my job, but I did it anyway. I went and did out of the goodness of my heart. I went there and said, hey, people of Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and DC, you should not have to swim in shit water. And he's the hero because he did what he didn't have to do. He could have just let the Americans in the river overseen by the, with the pipeline overseen by the EPA, the pipeline going out of, federal land, pipeline not overseen by Maryland or Virginia when it comes to the people on the board of said company. Like, oh, we could just abandon that. No, he can't. So he's just trying to frame it like he can't do anything. He doesn't have to do anything, and you really have to ask him nicely. And it also means that when he does less and more of the burden is ultimately placed on Maryland, which already has its state budget strained pretty immensely, he has an excuse for it, which is, I didn't have to. Didn't he ask so nicely? And that's why when Governor Westmore reacted to this, he did not react to this happy. He reacted to this more along the lines of, this is federal land. It happened, the break happened on federal land. He said that. He said the break, if it happens on federal land and it's overseen by a DC company, overseen by the mayor and council, and it's overseen by the EPA, then trying to skirt responsibility is wrong. That was essentially the governor's argument. And the governor's argument has played well in the state of Maryland, at least when it comes to the Baltimore Press and other local newspapers and outlets that are being published across the state about this conflict over the last 3 days, over the last 72 hours. Let me keep reading this continued avalanche towards Governor Westmore. A sewer line breach in Maryland has caused millions of gallons of raw sewage to be dumped directly into the Potomac River, a result of the incompetent local and state management of essential waste management systems. This is the same governor who cannot rebuild a bridge. Reminder, Donald Trump threatened the money to the Key West Bridge after a freighter manned by a foreign crew rammed into it after that freighter had an electricity outage. It was not the fault of the state outside of the question of reinforced material that could have been placed within the river to maybe help in a future ramming. But when it comes to why that bridge collapsed, when it comes to this ramming of the boat, it's not like it was like, oh, we rammed a boat, we had this, the government mismanaged XYZ. This, I mean, even with the reinforced barriers that people have recommended, it there's a likelihood it would have ended the same way with the casualties and with the bridge collapsing. And the Biden administration passed the legislation to fund that bridge's rebuilding, knowing that it was not the state of Maryland's fault. And the state of Maryland having one of the top 10 most active ports in the country based in Maryland, you want to have that passageway open. And you also want to help the tens of thousands of people who use the bridge to actually get to work and go home every day. And as Donald Trump got into office, once the local officials started saying, hey, I don't really like this troop deployment in DC, that eventually goes to Wes Moore saying, I don't like the troop deployment in DC. Trump doesn't like that. So he threatens the funding of the bridge, even though that was already passed by Congress and signed by the President of the United States. If it was already passed by Congress and signed by the President of the United States, you can't reverse that. You would have to go and pass entirely new legislation to take away that bridge funding. Despite that, he made the threat anyway. And if it wasn't for the fact that it was passed by Congress and signed by the President of the United States, there's a good chance that that bridge funding would have never been there. So again, I have to say, I said this at the start of stream and I will say it again. One of the most significant things that Joe Biden did for my state was approving that bridge funding for the rebuilding of the Key Bridge. The state of Maryland having to deal with the flooding that we've had to deal with over the last few years, having to deal with the issue of the Key Bridge collapsing, having to deal with the Potomac river pollution, over the 200 million gallons dumped into the river, having to deal with the problems that we've had with local crab populations, being preyed upon by invasive catfish species, as well as other possibly climate change related pressures that have lowered the population and have affected the wharfmen and different people who go out and crab for a living, as well as affected, of course, personally, crab cake prices, which is the biggest crisis that faces our state and our nation. Maybe the world, universe, either way. Like, this is there's all these problems that Maryland's facing, and because it's a blue state led by a governor who won't, silence their critique of the President of the United States, when a disaster happens, this government has been a lot less helpful when it comes to states that are blue in the fallout of a disaster. And the fault is ultimately placed at local officials. And when they get no federal support, and therefore the response is not as strong as it could be, the blame is placed on local officials, even though the federal government's responsibility to protect its own people is not being fulfilled. And the partisan needs of the President of the United States takes priority over people being able to get to work, over trying to rebuild bridges and rebuild infrastructure, over having pipelines that aren't built like in the 1960s, having modern pipes. And a lot of the pipes, it's not 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. We're going to have to replace a lot of these pipes in the next 20 years. That requires big infrastructure investments, big infrastructure bills. Can Donald Trump pass that legislation? Well, it seems he can't even pass his tariff legislation, despite claiming he can. So do we think he's going to be able to pass this legislation? I mean, I think the idea of a big infrastructure investment has more bipartisan support. But again, Mr. Art of the Deal has not been very good at passing bipartisan deals. So I don't think we're going to get that infrastructure package. So what if there is another leak even after the 6 months I heard that it's probably going to take to clean up the river if everybody works together, federal, state, and local officials to do the work, and they pool their resources and they act as money is no issue when dealing with their constituents' health, as they should. But that, of course, is assuming better case scenarios. While there has already been a lowering in the E. coli water tests and the amount of E. coli that is in the water, and that the spillage has largely been contained at this point, in order to clean the river, Again, America's river. Oh, we're the federal government. We don't believe we have any responsibility, despite what the EPA might say, a federal agency, over America's river. This is a very convincing argument. Maybe every issue, this is how Donald Trump should approach it. Oh, inflation, that's not my issue. Oh, anything that goes bad, anything that's really negative, anything that's not a good look, you just say it's not your issue. What was the thing he said about the economy 6 months ago, 8 months ago? If it's a good part of the economy, it's the Trump economy. If it's the bad parts of the economy, it's the Biden economy. Anyway, let's keep reading. A sewer line breach in Maryland has caused millions of gallons of raw sewage to be dumped directly into the Potomac River, a result of the incompetent local and state management of the essential waste management system. This is the same government who cannot rebuild a bridge. It is clear local authorities cannot adequately handle this calamity. Therefore, I'm directing federal authorities to immediately provide all necessary management, direction, and coordination to protect the Potomac, the water supply in the capital region, and our treasured national resources in our nation's capital city. While state and local authorities have failed to request needed emergency help, I cannot allow incompetent local leadership to turn the river and the heart of Washington into a disaster zone. He wanted them to come and kiss his fucking feet. Okay? Look, whether or not they called, he was trying to skirt responsibility. He then made it a confrontation. It didn't have to be a confrontation. He could have just gone out and said, we will provide the resources necessary in this moment. We care about people's health. We care about the people of DC's health, which is, of course, our responsibility as it is federal land. We care about the people of Maryland's health because it is our responsibility because they're American citizens. We care about the people of Virginia's health. We care about the people of West Virginia health. Hell, that's fucking Trump country. If there's ever been Trump country, West Virginia. Hell, even Virginia. Up until recently, that was run by a Republican, Glenn Youngkin. Okay? But that sweater vest is gone. Even so, what about those people? Did we just say, oh, well, they voted blue last time, so screw them. They get polluted sewage water. Oh, you didn't vote for Trump this time? Sewer water. Sewer water. It's a good response. Oh, you didn't vote for me last week? Sewer water. Sewer water. Lead pipes forever. My God, man. He wanted them to come and kiss the ring so then he could fulfill this delivery and take a victory lap. But there's a good chance that if he didn't politicize it, because he has to politicize every disaster response, they would have probably just called him and they had a rational conversation about it. I mean, it's not like they didn't request the federal government to be there. State and local officials in Maryland requested that the Environmental Protection Agency come before the state legislators, and so they can have like a conversation about what to do. They requested they turn up last Friday, way before he made this post or the other post that we read. You want to know what the Environmental Protection Agency did? Nothing. They did not show up. They did not attend the Maryland State Assembly meeting, and they didn't even Zoom call. I mean, even if they're like, oh, we don't have an official there, just Zoom call in. I mean, if you're talking, it's America's river, you're talking about it as a great calamity. If you're the president of a country where a great calamity is occurring, can you not find the time to send one bureaucrat to take a fucking phone call in some office space for a few hours to at least hear from state and local officials? Or is local coordination just that difficult for the state government? I mean, I understand, at least in like the Renee Good case and the Alex Preddy case, the lack of local cooperation, because that local cooperation might turn up something that acts against one of his key agendas. What is the lack of local cooperation here for? Is it just to create problems in blue states, to then point to blue administrations and say blue administrations are failing, red administrations are succeeding? Well, that doesn't work if it's also spilling into West Virginia. Or is the math, hey, Virginia just went blue, Maryland, DC, blue, blue, blue. So, hey, 3 blue, 1 red, go team. The math's out. I hate to think that the president of the United States thinks in this much of a partisan manner, but I'm not the only one who's read those reports about him looking at, asking about who voted for him when talking about disaster response in private meetings. And it's not like he hasn't, again, politicized disaster response before, as he does within this post right here about the Key Bridge after it collapsed. My goodness. So he just wanted them to kiss the ring. And when they didn't kiss the ring, he still had to act, because if he didn't do anything, I mean, that would look really bad to call it a calamity within the country and then say you're not going to do anything because they haven't asked. They haven't asked. As we saw in the Palisades, the Democrat war on merit has oh wait let me keep. I think we were treasured national resources in our nation's capital city. While state and local authorities have failed to request needed emergency help, I cannot allow incompetent local leadership to turn the river in the heart of Washington into a disaster zone. As we saw in the Palisades, the Democrat war on merit has real consequences. So he's saying that this is a effect of DEI. That's the implicit statement here. The Democrat war on merit is DEI buzzwords. The plane crash out of Ronald Reagan, DEI before we know anything. A month ago, there's a break in a pipe from the 1960s. You know what that could be also? That the pipe was made in the 1960s. If the pipe bursted from the 1960s, is it that the person who did it was DEI in the 1960s? He was a bad welder? Or it was the person who's supposed to replace it was DEI because they didn't have the money to do it? Was it the person? Was it that the DC water company was DEI because what? It's just throwing the buzzword out there. Is it the EPA's fault? Well, that's federal. Is that DEI in the federal government? That's Trump government. That's Trump's EPA that's been run by the Trump administration for a year. Oh my God. The federal government has no choice but to step in. FEMA, which is currently being defunded by the Democrats, will play a key role in coordinating the response. So it's good that something's happening, but that's also because something had to happen. I mean, it was under EPA oversight. But he tried to make sure he could shift the events of the pipe bursting, take an event that didn't have to be political outside of the fact that we have infrastructure failures in this country, and then try to make it about the war on meritocracy. That, you know, if we just had not hired people based on race or other characteristics like that, then we would have had better pipelines. I mean, could we say the same thing about Texas electricity? Or is that an infrastructure issue? Or does everything have to be culture war? Or pipelines are culture war? Or plane crashes are culture war? Everything is culture war.